Here are my 5 dog training and behaviour mistakes that I've made in the past, and number 5 is a big one.
Mistaking training and behaviour for being the same thing.
When people see a dog who is behaving badly, they don't often think, oh, that dog needs more support, or that dog needs some help with their emotions, or that environment is difficult for that dog. What they jump to is that dog needs more training. And I know I was definitely guilty of this in the past. Unfortunately, training will rarely help a behaviour problem. Behaviours are driven by emotions, associations, and genetics, whereas training is simply a dog's understanding of a cue word or an action. There is a popular phrase in the dog behaviour world, and that is that genetics loads the gun and the environment pulls the trigger.
You can teach an incompatible behaviour at the same time, such as sit and stay or watch me, but this doesn't improve the underlying issue that you have, and it can actually lead to you being a big part of the problem, which I found out the very hard way with my own dogs all those years ago. You can't out-train a behaviour problem because emotions need support, associations need changing over time, and genetics need both an understanding and an outlet to be provided. Mistake number 2 is asking the wrong person.
So this mistake stems from the first mistake. My first mistake was assuming that my dog who had behaviour struggles needed more training. The second mistake that I made was asking the wrong people for advice, and believe me, I asked a lot of people. But unfortunately, not the right person. I'd spoken to more than 50 people, both professional and non-professional, in the dog owning and training world. And not one of them ever said, have you considered there could be an underlying pain or a medical problem, and that's why you're not getting anywhere with it? So this is partly my fault and my mistake. But it's also partly their fault for not saying, I'm sorry, I'm not experienced enough to understand what's happening. Or, sorry, but I could refer you to someone who does know more, who does have more knowledge. They absolutely should have said, I am not the right person to give you the advice here, but here is someone who could help, or point me in the right direction. And I think this is the huge problem in the dog training and behaviour world is egos. Everyone has such a huge ego, where they believe that they know more than they do and they can help with absolutely anything based on a single conversation. What is wrong with saying, I don't know what to suggest, I would hate to make this worse for you and your dog? Because that's exactly what did happen to me and my dog all those years ago through taking poor advice. And this is exactly why I am so passionate about helping dog owners to find the right person for them, for the problem that they are having. If it's not me, that's fine. That doesn't matter. I will refer them to who is the right person for them.
Mistake number 3, not applying my knowledge of breed types and traits. In my early days of dog owning and training, I had a lot of knowledge, more so than most due to my obsession with dogs throughout my whole life growing up. I was very clued up about dog breeds and their traits, but for some reason, even with this knowledge, I didn't seem to pair it up with my own dogs. My first dog, who was a show line chocolate Labrador called Mackerson, was lovely, but being a show line Kennel Club registered chocolate Labrador meant that 1, he was incredibly dippy, 2, he couldn't work a day in his life, 3, he was inbred with a lot of medical and structural problems, and 4, he was loving and friendly to a fault. Mackerson firmly believed that everyone in the world was there to either love him, feed him, or be humped by him.
My biggest struggle with Mackerson is that he would clear fields to go and hump the head of another dog. I mean, it's hilarious to think about now, but it made walks really, really difficult and unenjoyable every single day. So just to jump back to mistake number 2 that I made, I followed the advice from the wrong people to try and help Mackerson with this head humping obsession. Here are the things that I was wrongly advised to do.
You need to be more interesting than the other dog is. That will stop it. So I used all of the highest value food, new toys, old toys, running with him.
I even tried a drop and roll one day to try and be more interesting than another dog out of sheer desperation, but none of it worked.
Teach him a solid recall. That will stop it. It didn't. All it did was teach him that every time I called him, it was because another dog had come into view. So it became a tip-off for him to look over his shoulder, spot the dog and then run at it, and inevitably hump it in the head. Keep him on a lead. That will stop it. Well, it stopped him running to them, but he would get close to them and then drag me over and then hump them whilst he was on lead. So it didn't really stop him humping, he just couldn't get there.
Show him you're not happy and tell him off. That will stop him. It didn't. Didn't at all. All it meant was that he would then avoid me when I got near him, and then that made it even harder to put him back on lead or to try and remove him from humping the other dog's head. You need to neuter him. If you neuter him, that will stop it. He's humping because he's too entire. I got him neutered. It didn't stop it. All it did was exacerbate all of the underlying medical conditions that Mackerson had and made them so much worse for him.
Do you see how the techniques I got advised got gradually more punishing, more sinister and more controlling of him and his movements? And it didn't even help. This was all from people who thought they knew best. And do you know why none of these training techniques worked? Because not one of them addressed the underlying reason why Mackerson was running across fields to hump other dogs.
He had a high social requirement, and I could have sorted my problem out in less than 2 weeks had I asked the right person and been given the right advice.
Back to mistake number 3. My second dog I brought home 11 months after having Mackerson. He was a puppy English Springer Spaniel, and he is the main reason I am a dog behaviour specialist today. Now here is where my mistake comes in. I was adamant that I did not want to have 2 dogs who ran across fields to hump the heads of other dogs. So before the opportunity even presented itself, I got started on teaching my very new to the world springy puppy that yes, he could be off the lead all the time, and he was, but every time we saw a person or a dog, he had to sit.
He was such an obliging, willing to please, greedy little bugger of a puppy that he did all of this with ease. And I thought, sorted. I'm not going to have 2 dogs who run across a field and hump the heads of other dogs. This one will sit and be beautiful every time we see a person or a dog. Big mistake.
I didn't know or realise that dogs had different social requirements and that breeds had different social requirements. Showline chocolate Labradors generally love the world. They think the world loves them, and they are highly optimistic and love fuss from people and a good tumble with other dogs. Springer Spaniels, on the other hand, love the world for a very different reason. All of the smells and the adventures. They love to run around like an absolute nutter, being outside with their human. A Springer needs their human, and dogs who they know and trust, who generally will leave them alone or who enjoy the same things they do. However, their social requirement is fairly low for meeting or interacting with new people and dogs.
So I was accidentally trying to prevent a problem that was never ever going to happen. And what this actually did was it increased the need for me and the value for me, and rapidly decreased the need for other people and dogs to be in his world at all. He hadn't learned how to greet people or dogs or social etiquette or how to interact at all. I had completely stunted all of his social skills in a really vital time when he should have been learning them, whilst trying to train him out of something that he was never going to be in the first place.
One day I will tell each of my dog stories, but for now, just note that one epic mistake I made was the starting point to Pudge being incredibly dangerous around other dogs and people throughout most of his life. Mistake number 4.
You may have heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, but if you haven't, this is the overestimation in capability, also known as the scale of knowledge versus confidence.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is a type of cognitive bias in which people believe they are smarter and more capable than they are. Now, this is much more common than you'd think. When I was in my early days of dog training, I believed I knew everything. But the more I've expanded my knowledge, the more I realise that even today, as a qualified and experienced dog behaviour specialist, there is so much out there that I don't know. I've always been very cautious about offering advice to dog owners who are not my clients, as I don't know the full history about their dog, and my caution has grown with the more knowledge I have. I'm always hesitant to offer help or a solution, not because I don't want to, but because I understand that there could be so much more to the picture than I know about, and giving out the wrong advice can make it a hell of a lot worse.
My advice to people now is if you think you know enough, that's a sure sign that you need to go out and learn more, possibly from different people or different sources than you've been learning from.
Mistake number 5, allowing social pressure to get to me.
Being keen to please other people is an absolute killer. For example, walking with people when it would be bad for my dog, or allowing people into my home with their dog when I know my dog wouldn't like it.
Social pressure is a huge thing, and particularly as a dog trainer, I had clients who wanted to walk with me and wanted to see my dogs, and I felt I had to show what my training could do.
Instead of saying, oh, good God, no, he would absolutely hate that. I wouldn't walk in with a dog he doesn't know. It'd be way too much for him. Like I would do now, and honouring his safety and giving him that out that he so desperately needed. Instead, I would go along on these walks and make him come with me and just tolerate whatever happened on it and make him tolerate it. And I really hate myself for doing that. I do. I still regret it to this day, of putting him through that and putting myself through that when it really wasn't necessary.
People pleasing is a toxic trait that is very, very self-destructive. And I'm pleased that I've grown a lot now, and I'm now more than capable of saying how I feel instead of hiding it to please other people. So please don't make the same mistakes that I have. I'm sharing these with you now so you can see how I fully understand how you may be feeling if you're struggling with your dog.
But also to try and hopefully prevent you from making some of the same mistakes that I made once and will never make again.